You good? Okay, so before we start, the source sheets might have been given out of order. It's fairly easy to put them back in order. They're numbered and the pages are numbered, so just make sure you have them in order. The topic that we're going to discuss today, I think is very relevant to everybody around the table, and especially us as a movement, if you will. It's a very relevant topic, and it also has relevance to this week's parsha. We say the Torah tells us that Avram was Makara people to the Eibusher, whatever Judaism was at the time. And one of the big halachic discussions that pertain to that is whether or not somebody can invite a non-observant Jew to a meal for Shabbos, with the understanding that they're going to drive home afterwards. So we'll discuss that. So the first source that anybody that's going to deal with this topic is going to deal with the Isser of Lifnei Iver. Right? There's the pasuk says in Parashat Kedoshim, in source number 1, "Lesikal cherish Lifnei Iver loisitein michshol." Should not curse a deaf person. Should not put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. So Rashi right away tells us that the meaning of the law is not the simple interpretation of the pasuk. Rashi says that don't say lifnei hasuma bedavar. If somebody's blind, you're ignorant in a certain area, don't give him bad advice. The example that Rashi gives is, let's say somebody knows that the real estate market's going to crash, and they have a desire to buy that person's field. They shouldn't tell them, I think you should divest from real estate and invest. Rashi says, don't go buying nothing. Don't do that with the intention of buying his field from him. So the law is not simply don't place a stumbling block in front of a blind person, it's don't give bad advice. The Minchas Chinuch in Mitzvah Reish Lamed Beis is medayik from the Rambam and the Chinuch that the mitzvah or the law of Lifnei Iver is so far removed from its simple interpretation that when one would actually go put a stumbling block in front of a blind person, they would be over many lavim. One of them wouldn't be Lifnei Iver. Lifnei Iver has nothing to do with its simple interpretation. And the Malbim is famous for his opinion that he articulates in his Akdama to Vayikra that drushes of Chazal are not simply that they just heard it from Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a Masorah, and there's no basis for it in the text. He says, and anybody that with an understanding of the language of Lashon HaKodesh, with his grammar and syntax and the fully meaning of a pasuk, will know that something's amiss and there's a need for a drasha. And he says in this pasuk, the way that the Chazal knew that it can't mean the simple interpretation is because if you were to translate it directly, like Sitei Mishal means you shouldn't give a stumbling block to a blind person. If you were to articulate the law of not tripping a blind person, it would be Loitasim Mishal. Don't place a Mishal, not Sitei. It has so Chazal understood that it has to be something you give, and therefore they came to understanding that you give advice. So that's how they came to their understanding of the law. You shouldn't mislead someone. Titein is to give, and Tasein is to place. I don't give you, if I'm trying to trip you, I don't give you a brick to trip on. I put it down and you trip on it.
Oh, that's the classic example from the Rashi. You don't put the brick. You do a because you wanted to make a better decision.
Oh, that's exactly why Rashi says it's not don't put a stumbling block, it's an Eitzah. That's how Rashi knows it's Eitzah. Because if it was not Eitzah, it would say Pasuk. That's what I was saying. That's all.
That's how obvious the Torah is required.
So the Gemara in Avodah Zarah extends the law of Sitei Michshol to not only bad advice or to misleading, but also to Averis. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah says in the Chavav Amar Aleph, Tanya Amar Rabbi Nassim, Minayin shelo yashit Adam kashal yayin lenazir ve'ever min achai lebnei noyach. How do I know that one shouldn't give a cup of wine to a nazir or even min achai to ben noyach? Because it says Talmud Leimer lifnei Iver lo sitei michshol. It says with Neiver, you shouldn't place a stumbling block in front of a blind person. So the Gemara goes on to say that this is only when the Nazir is Me'ever Lenar. He's on the other side of the river, and he's unable to cure the wine on his own. Because if he was able to just reach out and take it, there would be no lav. This is relevant. A very practical application. This is anytime you're on a plane and you're sitting next to a non-frum person, and the stewardess asks you to pass them their food. And if it's not a kosher meal, maybe it's lifnei iver. So Gemara tells us that you can only over lifnei iver if the nazir of the person that's going to perform the isser is unable to acquire the item without you. So now the question is, so in our case of inviting a non-religious person for a Shabbos meal, right, they're able to be Mechal Shabbos without you. They have access to the car, and in all likelihood, they will be Mechal Shabbos without you. They'll turn the light, they'll make their own food, whatever isser they might do. So it wouldn't be lifnei iver deraisa. The question that we have is that by many lavim, by many isurim, Chachamim took liberties and extended the lav in order to protect it. Somebody shouldn't come to be over it. And they made gzeros. So did Chachamim do a similar thing here? Did Chachamim place a Isser D'Rabbanan under D'Oraisa? So the source for that is there's a Mordechai. The Mordechai, Sefer Mordechai in Avodah Zarah over there, brings the following case from the father, the Avi Yizri, Rav Yoel, third lines to the bottom. The Sefer Mishem Avi Rabbeinu Yoel. Lahatir, he was matir limcher la'oivik chavim to sell to oivik chavim, to sell to a priest their begadim, their clothing that they use when they're merani in avodah, when they sing in their church and they perform various functions of the church that otherwise would be a stiff of avodah zarah. But Rabbeinu Yonah was matir it because they're going to come to you. The question was, can I sell them this clothing that we use in the church service? Is it an isser of lifnei iver? There's lifnei iver by going, like the Gemara said. So Rabbi Yonah said, if they don't go to you, they're going to go to another tailor. You're not the sole place for them to procure this clothing. Avodah Zarah. You're helping them do their avodah. You're helping them serve their geshter. They're not allowed to do avodah Zarah. So over there, clearly, we see the Mordechai doesn't raise any issue to Rabbanan. Rabbeinu Yoel clearly quotes the Deraisa. The deraisa is only if there's no other way of procuring it. Any passages like that, we see the Chachamim did not make a subsequent gezerah to prevent somebody from being over the Isser. So right now, if you would ask the Mordechai would tell you not only is it fine with deraisa, it's also fine with Rabbanan. There is no gezerah. You can fully invite someone that's unobservant. There's no Isser and there's no question. But Tosfos in Masechah Shabbos and Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, Tosfos has the case, the Mishnah gave a case of an onion of balabayis, of that one, the balabayis is in his home, and he passes food to the ani who's standing in Rosh Hashanah, and the ani is thereby over Nisi the rights of carrying Rosh Hashanah of Hitzah. So Tosfos says this is not only the case when it's clenched in, it's not only Tosfos says it's lifnei iver also. And it's not only when it's clenched in the balabayas' hand and the ani is unable to clear unless the balabayas opens his hand and give it, but it's also if he simply passes and the ani could have reached it from the window. Meaning that Tosfos of the understanding that there is an Isser D'Rabbanan, and Tosfos brings us out because there's a din D'Rabbanan that if somebody sees a kid with tarfus, with something that's Asur B'Achila, he has to take it away from him because Misayeh, the Chachamim made a din. You're not allowed to help or facilitate the performance of an avera. So Tosfos similarly over here, there's such a halacha that you can't have any form of involvement in an avera. So now the point that we're holding, it's not like this Tosfos the Mordechai this is a drama. That's what it would come out. Tosfos doesn't say that. Tosfos is talking about a different case, but it would come out that way. So now it comes out that Tosfos holds that the Chachamim didn't make a Gezer D'Rabbanan. There is an Isser D'Rabbanan of having any role in somebody being over an Avera. So the Ramah in Yerodea says the following in source number 10. Yesh Oimrim Hada also Limkar Lahem Dvarim HaShaychim Avodosa Hainu Dafka Im Ein Lahem Acheret Kiyotze Boy Shlo Yuchal Likmeis B'Makom Acher Yuchlu Lichmeis B'Makom Acher Alim Licholim Likmeis B'Makom Acher Mutter. So Tosfos quotes the Torah. The Ramah quotes the Mordechai. Then he says V'yesh Machmirim. Meaning the Yesh Machmirim, there's Tosfos holds Asur, but we as the master are no lahaka. Kisvara Rishayna, Chol Bali Nefesh, Chamir La'atzma, Yachmir La'atzma. And any Bal Nefesh should be master for himself. So if the Ramah would walk into the room, you know, the Ramah what the din would be The Rama would say, Ikar Hadin, it's fine, but a Baal Nefesh should be mashmer. But not everybody's a Baal Nefesh. A lot of the circumstances this shaila presents itself are for family reasons, or you can say that for a Chabad house, it could be different. So there are extenuating circumstances. So we're not going to enforce Baal Nefesh. Halacha is Me'ikar Hadin. So Me'ikar Hadin, the Rama would say it's fine. The Shabbos Yor in Shabbos has a very interesting deal in the Rama. It says Melosha Rama, number 11, the Masha Kasav Yesh Machmir. The Rama quotes Tosfos not as a Yesh Oimrim.
He said, the normal athlete, but for Baal Nefesh, we say the normal athlete because
yeah.
Back in the minute is everybody's Mahmed. You see, you didn't segregate no, because normal athlete. If I say normal athlete.
People are Baal Nefesh now. Everybody is very full. Religion is in fashion. So he says, Melashon Ramah b'masha kasav yesh machmirim. This that the Ramah quotes places of the yesh machmirim not as a yesh oimrim, relate kasav yesh oisrim michlal shadaite noite mamatirim. That means that he really holds like the Mordechai because he's not quoting Tosfos as an opposing opinion. Rather, he says that there are those that are stringent, not that there are those that are oyster, like Tosfos would have presented it. It says, "V'zeh klal b'yadenu." This is a klal. In reading the Ramah, if you ever see the Ramah quote one opinion, then quote a yesh machmirim or a yesh matirim, it means that he's not really following his opinion, he's just quoting it, that you should know that there's this opinion. Fine. So now, according, right, like what we said, the Ramah would say it's fine, is yesh machmirim. But if you look in Siman Shimam Zayin, in Orach Chaim, where it gives the case of the Balabayas, only the Balabayas, you'll see that the Beis Yosef doesn't bring the case of Tosfos. But the Magen Avraham clearly passes like Tosfos. He doesn't even bring the Mordechai. He just says Osir. The Magen Avraham passes that it's Osir even to be Masayeh, like Tosfos, completely, seemingly rejecting Shittas HaMordechai. And if you look in the Alter Rebbe quotes the Magen Avraham, and also does not mention Shittas HaMordechai. So, seemingly now, so if any it would be very interesting that if any Ashkenazi would ask their rabbi would tell them it's fine, there's a yesh machmirim, but there is a yesh machmirim. But if a Lubavitcher would go to a Rav, and seemingly you have the Alter Rebbe that says it's Asr. But we have the Shach. The Shach in Yeridea, over there where the Ramah quotes the Mordechai in the Tosfos, number 14, speak it out loud. So he's very bothered by understanding that there's a Machlokes Mordechai and Tosfos. Because he quotes a Rosh and a Rabbeinu Yerucham, then in both one place they cite Tosfos, that it's Asr as Isser Masayeh, and in another place they quote the Mordechai, seemingly saying that there's no Isser D'Rabbanan. So the Shach is saying, to learn like the Ramah, you have a steer in the Rishonim. So the Shach comes up with a chiluk. The Shach says there's a very big difference between the person that Tosfos is talking about and the person the Mordechai is talking about. The Tosfos says the Shach says Mordechai is talking about a guy or a mummer. The way the Noid Yehuda explains it, that it's a mazid. This person is purposefully being over the law, and the logic, and therefore there's no isser. I mean, the logic and the seeming logic behind that is, where do I learn out Misayeh from? I learn it from a katan. A katan doesn't have das, so I learn out when somebody's doing an isser b'shogeg, I should prevent them from doing it. But if somebody's knowingly and willfully being over a law, Chachamim were never misakin their gzeira. They don't have a limit for it, so they don't have a misakin. Therefore, by the Mordechai's case, where somebody willfully and knowingly doing the law, it's a guy. Therefore, it's mutter. Where else, Tosfos is talking about a ani. The ani, in all likelihood, it's just the poor person that's very hungry and wants food and is desperate for food. So it's a shaykeh. So therefore, there's an Isser Masayeh. The Saf Sefer in Chuvah has a very interesting thing when he quotes the Shach. It says, "V'hini hashach mizari da'aron hakoyin." Because he avid uvda da'aron. The Shach, who's a koyin of the Zara of Aaron, did a Maisa of Aaron. He took a machlokes of the Rishonim and he made shalom. That's what the Saf Sefer says. Like we said, the Dakamon Rava says that the Shach is making a chiluk between a mazid and a shogeg. So if that's the case in our case, somebody's driving to a meal on Shabbos, as much as a Tinnik Shenishba they are, well, they know what Shabbos, we're assuming that they know what Shabbos is, and they're willfully and knowingly selecting to drive on Shabbos. They might not be held liable or responsible because they're tinik shenishpa, whatever other didn't really apply to them. But you can't say that they're a shaygi. They're amazed. They're just not punished, maybe. So therefore, they're what do you mean? They know that you're not allowed to drive on Shabbos. We're assuming that they know that, meaning the person that's coming to Chabad house knows that the rabbi doesn't drive on Shabbos. You're inviting a family member that's not religious. They know that you don't use electricity on Shabbos. So they are aware that this is a user. They might not treat it with the same respect or the same knowledge that we have, but they're doing the act knowingly. So the question is, we pass him like the shach or not? He will be at home, but you're not making him be over. He has access to his car. He has his car keys. He has his light. He's going to cook dinner. It's not that you're introducing Isser to him. The fact that you're playing a role in it, for Moshe brings up, we'll figure out later that maybe it might be Shabbos might be different.
You're also going to the fact that father's life driving the father's not basic for it. So kids are getting in the car, there's no issue at all.
Well, the kids no, so that might actually make it worse because there's no meaning. Well, there's no basic for him, but so what? Getting in the car. You're right. It could be the Rabbanon. You're right. Maybe it'll lessen the discussion. It's correct. So the question is, do we name on the shach? So the Rav Moshe in Ibn Ezer says, like when he has a similar case, says there's no Isser Messiah, Lefi the Shach and the Dagum Rava, and they're really correct, and it's noy to pass over them, over the Rabbah in this case. Rav Moshe takes on their svara. So there's a Shuvah Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe was presented the following case by Rav Hagoyin Amerfusam, Ben Sion Rakov. So from the Shuvah, it sounds like he was the owner or the manager of a catering hall. And he writes to Rav Moshe that a couple came to him, and by the way they're dressed and by the way they're presenting themselves, he's not sure how tall the mechitza is going to be by dancing. He knows there's going to be mixed dancing, and he wants to know to Rav Moshe if he can rent the hall out for them. Meaning there would be a lifnei iver, dancing would be Isser Deraisa, mixed dancing would be, he's of the understanding there would be Isser Deraisa, and he wants to know if by renting the hall is the over lifnei iver. So the first thing Rav Moshe does is Rav Moshe quotes the Shach. Rav Moshe says that they're a mumur this haver, they're amazed over here, so therefore it's matter. And Rav Moshe adds a couple other haterim. Rav Moshe is saying even if you're going to pass like the Magen Avram over the Shach, meaning there's a svara to not say svaras the Shach and the Magen Avram, so that might be relevant for us as Chabaditers. Then I'll give you two other svaras. Rav Moshe says, first of all, you're not renting them the Dvaris. You're not providing them the thing that they're going to do the Isser with. You're giving them a hall. You get married to have mixed dancing. You rent a hall to get married. They're going to have many functions within this hall throughout their wedding. One of them is going to be an Isser, but that's not the overall intent of the Maisa. You're not renting it so that they should dance. And Rav Moshe says, another svara, Rav Moshe says that if they wouldn't come to you, they're going to go to someone else that won't have a problem with it. And that will probably lead to not necessarily a kosher marriage, and definitely not kosher food not a kosher caterer. So at least they're coming to you, they're going to have kosher food and a marriage kalacha, and you can do it. So that's Rav Moshe's father.
So in other words, you're facilitating the opposite.
Correct. What you really are facilitating is they might be over one thing, but you're really facilitating many mitzvahs. So you could apply a similar logic to our case. You're not inviting them for the sole purpose of them driving. You're inviting them, they should experience Shabbos, they should have Kiddush, they should have a meal, they should be niskared through this guy. Right? They did one of these places, they did a questionnaire or whatever, a study, I think. One of these places in Eretz Yisrael, they found they were most successful with two experiences. Inviting people over for Shabbos and going to the place with making people from. So it's with a positive intent. There are many mitzvahs that are going to come out of it. So there's one Isser. So it would be easy to transpose the logic of Rav Moshe in this case to our case of Shabbos. So I don't know if it's has balances to help out, but there is a mitzvah that's directly happening with Shabbos. Meal Kiddush. Kiddush is a mitzvah right, so there is a mitzvah that's happening there. But you're right, there are and kosher food. You're having kosher food, which is Moshe's main story about the wedding hall. They're going to go somewhere else and eat trade. They're coming to you, they're going to have kosher. So instead of having a kosher marriage, now it's going to be kiddush. So there would be a line of reasoning you can argue that you can transpose the arguments. The Ksav Sofer adds another chiluk. The Ksav Sofer, in that very truth that we quoted earlier, says that he wants to make a distinction between the Mordechai and Tosfos. That by Tosfos' case of handing the ani the food, what you're handing the ani is the very thing you're going to be over the Isser with. This is the device that's going to be taken out from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. So you're playing a role in the Ma'aseh Avera. It says by the Mordechai, you're selling the galach the clothing on Tuesday. He's going to go to church on Sunday. You're removed from the Ma'aseh Isser. So very much over here, you're very much removed from the Ma'aseh Isser. You're not starting the car for him. You're not giving him a boost. He's coming to your house, and afterwards he's going to be over a Ma'aseh Isser. But you are completely removed from the Ma'aseh. So as of now, the way it stands, it's mutter, and we gave many svaros to argue why it would be mutter. But things, and that's how Ramesh Shturmach, who is the guy with the Eida Faredis, so he paskins at number 25 in Charles Chuvas Van Haggis. When somebody asked him about Shuvah, asked whether they can invite their non-religious relatives to a meal Shabbos, Ramesh Shturmach said it is fine, with the understanding that it's going to lead to them having a ruchnistic experience. And he said that not only is it not Misayeya or Lifnei Iver, it's the opposite of Lifnei Iver. You're not putting them down, you're helping them up. You're bringing this guy into Yiddish guy, they're experiencing Torah mitzvahs. That's going to be a positive thing. The one thing he stipulates, though, is that you should tell them not to park in front of your house because Chil Hashem. Although, it's worth knowing that Rav Moshe Sternbach is speaking about from neighborhood, Eretz Yisrael. I'm not sure if he was Africa or Eretz Yisrael at the time, but it's from neighborhood. It's a place where it would be Chil Hashem, or else Chabad houses. It's different. I know Rabbi Korf in Florida has a policy that all the shluchim have to block the front parking lot. So back when they leave open, but there's a policy to lock the front parking lot. But many shluchim lock both parking lots. But that you shouldn't necessarily facilitate their parking. You should be totally removed. That's the Rav Moshe Sternbach paskins. By what?
Can't park in front of the house, park in the back. One thing, don't invite them and you won't go, you're gonna nobody get hit by driving. Go ahead, right from my house, park in the back, so no one sees the shot.
I would assume you would have to articulate it if you're going to drive. If
there's accommodations available, a hotel or apartments that they can stay in. You're not telling them, but it's a shoulder. You have choices, whatever you want, but you have to drive. The reason he does it is the specific issue of the question. That's the reason he has to point that.
So you could say that you're going to articulate it. If you're going to drive, don't park in front of my house. Something to that extent. But just make sure they don't park in front of your house. That's what he says. So we're going to speak about it. So Rav Moshe, so up until now, the various shuvas of Rav Moshe that we presented, you would think that Rav Moshe would tell you that it's mutter. Rav Moshe has a tshuva, somebody by the name of Rav Tali Kalbach. He was a Rav in Detroit in the 50s. And he wrote to Rav Moshe, he wanted to know about encouraging people to come to shul. And many of those people will drive to shul. So can he encourage people to come to shul on Shabbos, knowing that they're going to drive? Rav Moshe says, not only is it asur, but he compares him to the nachash, like the primordial snake. You're not, there's no isur misayeya or lifnei iver, but you're a mesis. You're enticing them, you're seducing them to be over an isur. You're telling them, it's going to be so beautiful, come to shul, and you're getting them to be mechal Shabbos b'yadayim because of you. Like Rabbi Kalman said. Now, it's not a misayer or lifnei iver, it's a mesis. So, that's a very strong lashon. And it is, and Rav Moshe says, how do I know that mesis is not only by Israel Avodah Zarah? We encounter mesis in the Torah, in Devarim. The Torah speaks about somebody that convinces other people to do Avodah Zarah. and therefore, and he has punished, and the Torah doesn't view him very fondly, to put it nicely. So Ramesh says, how do I know that it applies to other Yisurim other than Avodah Zarah? So he brings a raya from the Nachash. The Nachash convinced Chava to be over the Isser, and he was not, it's not an Isser there, right? It's not an Isser of Avodah Zarah, it was an Isser of Mina'it Fleiseichel. So there I see there's a Mesis outside of the context of Avodah Zarah. So for a number of, so that's what Rav Moshe said. And all we aim lanu elo divrei Rav Moshe. We only have what he writes in the Tshuva. But for a number of reasons, there are some questions on this Tshuva. Rav Moshe, in another place in his Tshuvas, paskins that a frum doctor can actively and knowingly convince and trade places with a non-frum doctor to take over a shift on Shabbos. So why is that different? You're enticing that person and you can barter with them, you can change shifts, you can do an extra shift and change them doing your Shabbos shift. Why is that any different? Why does Rav Moshe not call that Mesis? And on the premise of Rav Moshe, when you say Mesis outside of the context of Avodah Zarah, in the Gemara in Sanhedrin where it calls the Nachash Mesis, the Rishonim, it's the Shans V'Rosham, go try to explain and find the Makom to say that the Chet Tzadash is an Isra Avodah Zarah, in the sense that Adam Chava and Adam and Chava wanted to make themselves gods. They wanted to be all-knowing. So they find that to be an Isra Avodah Zarah. So for those two reasons, you might be able to say that the impetus for Rav Moshe writing this tshuva, he could hold it as something wrong, but the reason why he's going out so strongly is because at the time the conservative movement, which Rav Kalbach seems to be a rav of the conservative acts or conservative shul at the time, had come with the tshuva, although that they held Chilul Shabbos as Aser, but you were allowed to drive to shul. They just come out with the tshuva, you're allowed to drive to shul on Shabbos because of Ein Shvus B'Migdash. The conservative rabbinate had come out of the tshuva, and for that reason, there was a big shift in the conservative movement. Yossel Rosenblatt, actually, his son was a conservative rabbi in Baltimore, and when they came out with that tshuva, he switched the shul over to Orthodox. There was a big schism in the Orthodox movement. A lot of them moved to modern Orthodoxy. So Rav Moshe could be dealing with a shul that everybody in the shul is Shomer Shabbos. They just think that driving to shul might be permissible. So you encouraging them to drive to shul will lead to a desecration of Shabbos. But if you're dealing with something that's totally non-observant, it may be different. But there's a point to note that Moshe goes with this Lashitasa. Moshe had another case to Rav Aryeh Kaplan. I'm not sure if it's the Rav Aryeh Kaplan. We're familiar with a different Aryeh Kaplan. It was running a kids program. And he wanted to know if he could invite the whole community, knowing that some people in the community drive to shul for Shabbos. So Rav Moshe said, you can invite the whole community for Shabbos to the kids program. But you have to put on the flyer that people that drive there will not receive any prizes. You're giving a prize to the kids, any that drive to shul will not receive any prizes. Not only can you not encourage them, you have to make a disclaimer that you don't approve of what they're doing, and it's totally awesome. Similar to they say that the Frierdiker Rebbe, I remember once seeing there was a letter to the Frierdiker Rebbe that went about having Jews come to shul on Shabbos, and the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted them to take out letters, advertisements in all the newspapers that it's usher to drive to shul on Shabbos. So, and similarly, the Shevet Alevi, Rav Vosner Paskins, that it's also to come to shul on Shabbos. To invite someone that's not from on Shabbos, number 27. The person that's matter is Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Rav Shlomo Zalman, in a tshuva, he gave this talk to NCSY. They were having an event. They wanted to know about inviting people for Shabbos. Rav Moshe Paskin, it's mutter for the above mentioned reasons, but you have to offer them a place to sleep. You have to make it possible that there shouldn't be Chilul Shabbos. You don't have to tell them it's wrong. You don't have to protest. You have to simply tell them, if you want, you can stay by me. I have a place for you to sleep. So their decision to be Mechal Shabbos is totally their own. And you played no role in it because you are offering them a way of going about it without being Mechal Shabbos. They say when Rav Shlomo Zalman heard, there's a Rav in Dallas, he was his driver, when Rav Shlomo Zalman heard that this tshuva was publicized, he was very upset. Not that he backed away from his psak, but he wanted it to be a case-by-case basis. You call your Rav, and your Rav gives you a heter, not an overarching heter to be matter. Right? So we have some of the people that hold it's usher. We have Rav Shlomo Zalman, Baruch that hold it's mutter. Just to end off with a spara to be matter. So in number 30. So the Tzitz Eliezer of Oldenburg, the Rav Yushalayim, had the following case. Not to get into the discussion, but Rav Oldenburg was of the opinion that smoking was an Isser Deraisa. And somebody who owned the Makolet in Eretz Yisrael wanted to know, can I sell cigarettes? You hold it's an Isser Deraisa. Can I sell cigarettes in my store? It's a Misayea, it's a Lifnei Iver, what is it? So Rav Alden told him it's not Lifnei Iver because they can go to any other store and buy cigarettes, but it would be a Misayea. Because you're eight, but you can't function in Eretz Yisrael. You can have a newsstand, but that's not, you're not going to function. He says, what can you do? The only Isser is Misayea. Says Misayea, I learned out Misayea from Arvos. There's a collective obligation, there's a bris that everybody has dual responsibility on making sure everybody is Mekayim and keeps their mitzvahs. So he quotes, Arvos we don't say by women. Only men have a din Arvos. So he says if a woman were to own the store, it wouldn't be a problem because she has no Isser and she can sell cigarettes to men. Or if you're selling to a woman, it's fine. Because there's no Arvos. She doesn't have Misayea. So if that's the case, if the shlucha were to invite the guest, there wouldn't be a problem. Right. Your wife should invite the guest.